Hi, my name is Bill Gould. I'm a statistician at New Mexico State University. I'm here today to talk about a faculty-led international program that Dr. Tim Wright from biology and myself are collaborating on this coming spring. We both teach our own class. He teaches a tropical biology class. I teach a population survey class. And together we combine to lead a group of students to Costa Rica to collect field data for projects that they develop throughout the semester and then analyze once we return. It's a great opportunity for people to see a different part of the world with a lot of biodiversity that is absolutely amazing. So I just want to show you a few slides from the last class we did, which is about 4 years ago, and give you an understanding of what the classes are and what the field work is. And then if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is wgould@nmsu.edu. So now I'll show you some slides. So this is just a picture. Oh, no, that's
now
right.
You can forward on
that was a picture from a waterfall that we stopped at on the way back toward the end of our trip. Costa Rica is a beautiful country with all kinds of beautiful landscapes. This is an example of the course structure. So he has a biology 450/550 class on tropical ecology. Mine is titled here Occupancy Modeling. It'll be maybe perhaps broader population survey methods that might include some point count surveys as well, if I can fit it in. Tim and I actually originated this idea based on a meeting at the Center for International Border Studies lab in Nason House, and both Tim and I have prior experience in Costa Rica, so we decided to combine forces and lead groups of students to the country to conduct these projects. As I mentioned, the projects themselves are planned prior to the trip. The data is collected during the trip, and then upon return they analyze the data and summarize it in a report. The classes are graded, so you do get a grade for each of the classes based on the field work and the project reports that you provide. This is an example of the topics in the material. Tim talks about tropical ecosystem ecology, the history and the habitats, plants. I talk more about survey methodology that involves a little bit of probability distributions when it comes to estimating the kind of parameters that we're interested in. Specifically, I'm focusing on occupancy, which has to do with the distribution of species across the landscape. And as part of that, we talk about some of the estimation methodology underlying the software that I'll present to you. This is a rough idea of the itinerary that we have. It will, in-country, be over 10 days over spring break. We'll leave on a Friday before spring break and come back on the Sunday before classes begin. We'll essentially have 3.5 days in a tropical dry forest and 3.5 days in a wet forest. Those locations actually have changed, so we're actually going to some new sites, not because we didn't like the old sites, but because we wanted to try some new places. And we've got some really nice locations, but they are basically the same in terms of one being a tropical forest that's dry and one that's wet. We also have a beach and snorkeling excursion halfway through the program, and we also are traveling to a couple other places toward the end of the trip that should provide a little downtime as well. So this is a map of the country. We will be staying, initially we'll be flying into Liberia, which is over on the northwestern part of the country, and then driving down that peninsula toward, I'm going to say toward Carrillo there, which is where the first biological station is at a place called Serenas. That's the tropical dry forest. After our stay there, we'll be crossing the water body there at Punta Arenas on a ferry, and then driving on to our second field location, which is on the opposite side of the mountains near Monteverde, on the Caribbean side, if you will. Very different kind of forest. This is what the tropical dry forest looks like. It looks pretty dry, and it is. Very hot, also very humid. Some winds, of course, because you're in a coastal area. But I think we have some conditioning here in New Mexico given our heat. So they are hot days. We do surveys usually in the morning, eat lunch, and have some siesta time before going out before dinner. So we try and time those in cooler time frames. This is a map that describes some of the dry forest constriction that's occurred. That's something that will be talked about in Tim's class. So now just want to give you a few photos of the biota that you will be seeing. Hopefully you can, your pattern recognition is pretty good. These are bats on the bottom of a underlying, or the top of a rock, kind of overhanging rock. We saw those on a rafting trip. This is a bat hanging upside down under a canopy. Of course, there are a lot of different bird species in the areas that we're going. Hummingbirds are one of many incredibly beautiful species that you'll see. There are monkeys. This is a howler monkey, but there are other species of monkeys that we'll also likely see. This gives you an idea of the sort of the trail, at least in one location in the dry forest, where students are conducting these surveys. They are in groups, so you're working together as teams in these field projects for safety reasons and a variety of other reasons. So, and the faculty, but Dr. Wright and myself will be going out with the groups themselves. More biota. The upper left is a strawberry frog or blue jean frog. It's a poison dart frog. The toad on the right has these big sacs on the sides, which can shoot poison if you get too close to it. So something to be aware of. Of course, an iguana there on the lower left, and then on the lower right is a viper that was right along the trail, right next to Dr. Wright's foot when he went in to go grab a frog. So there are some hazards, and that's one of the things that you always need to be looking out for in the places we're going to be, would be the vipers. That's probably the most hazardous thing. We're going in the dry season, so there really wasn't much bug activity at the time that we've been before, but you know, that could vary, of course. Some more species, in this case birds. There's a guam, ibis, a type of whippoorwill, and then a type of jay. I can't remember the name of that jay, but eating some fruit there. So a lot of diversity in that regard. Here's another example of a species we may see. Hanging down on the right is a sloth. We actually I probably saw 3 or 4 sloths, and we were fortunate enough to come across one late at night on a walk back along a hanging bridge, and so we all got to literally pet a sloth as we walked in the opposite direction as it made its way across the bridge. So that was an amazing experience that probably not many people get to have. I'm not going to promise that we get that again, but it was pretty phenomenal. This is an example of one of the places that we stayed at before, Tarantino Reserve. It's a very nice place. The accommodations where we're going are, I'm going to say, a little bit rustic because they are remote biological field stations, but they always have very good bedding, great food, and to be honest, great service in terms of guides that have provided guided walks when we first arrive at locations. Here's another example of what that trail system looks like. And we use, where we're going, all the systems, all of the locations have trail systems, which is what we use for these surveys. Here's another hanging bridge example, and an example of one of the programs that occurred in the evening. Somebody brought some snakes. This is a boa that they brought in for people to look at. More examples of biota, again, a variety, of course, amphibians, butterflies. In this case, those on the lower left there are bats. They're white bats, and I can't remember the name of them, but I'm going to call them a white canopy bat. But examples of the kinds of things that you see. Of course, the landscape is beautiful. We do some mist netting, so some other occasions have bird in hand. We visited Coffee Plantation on our last day last time. We may do that again. Where we're going, there will be a waterfall, and we'll be somewhat close to Arenal volcano. You probably will see a volcano, at least from a distance. We're there. And then just a brief mention of the food's phenomenal. Night hikes are very entertaining. And of course, snorkeling is a whole nother world that opens up to people when they come along. So that's all I wanted to say. I'll let the students talk to you. This is what some of the students said as a result of the last class we had, and I hope that I'm sure that we'll have similar kinds of comments and experiences for the group that goes this coming spring.
So I can switch back so we can see you again.
I think that's it.
Okay. Want to just say some finishing words?
Yeah, you probably you might have some questions. So again, please feel free to email me wgould@nmsu.edu. Also, the cost, I'm sure, is one of the things that you're wondering about. I'm going to say the cost is approximately $1,500 for the entire program, so that excludes the travel cost. And so right now the travel costs look like they're maybe going to be between, say, $800 to $1,000 in terms of flying back and forth to Costa Rica. So total cost may be around $2,500. Of course, that doesn't include things like souvenirs, but it includes all the transportation, all the excursions, the lodging, the food. So pretty much all inclusive without respect to ancillary things like souvenirs. And we'll have a little time to get some of that on the way back. If you have any other questions, please let me know.